This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating.
It's the stuff legends are made of. The greatest. Records broken. Host. Bellies fed of all time. Become the GOAT by getting all your big game needs online and in-store at Smart & Final today. Save big at Smart & Final, where 12-pack bottles of Corona, Modelo, Newcastle, Kona, or Pacifico beer are $9.99 each. Limit 2 with additional $25 minimum purchase.
News stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman and Special Defense Counsel Larry Klayman. We may need to change the name of the show because my client is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and I'm defending him in the criminal defense of Robert Mueller's grand jury investigation. Dr. Corsi is going to be on later in the show. You'll hear from him, get his observations on what's been going on. But this last week has seen the aftermath of the Roger Stone indictment, which occurred just about a week ago. And we saw all of those FBI agents raiding his house, taking electronic equipment, cell phones, other kinds of evidence that they'll be dissecting over the next few months. And we saw Roger to go on a public relations campaign, not just with regard to attempting to defend himself in public, but to disparage and defame my fine client, Dr. Jerome Corsi. And again, we're going to hear from Dr. Corsi shortly after this segment. He's going to be on segments 2 and 3. And I want you to listen very carefully to what he said, because Dr. Corsi has never gone after Roger Stone. He simply has told the truth. And the indictment which came down with regard to Roger Stone confirmed that. He was accused of no wrongdoing, but Roger Stone was accused of lying about documentation which he had in his possession. That explains the raid on his home. They want to see what he has internally, as well as what the special counsel has acquired through surveillance and other means, as well as threatening witnesses such as Randy Credico, who was allegedly threatened physically. His dog was threatened. You know, I read it, to kill the dog. I mean, mafioso style. And this is what gave rise to the indictment of Roger Stone. There's a senator on Capitol Hill by the name of John Kennedy, not the John F. Kennedy, but he's from Louisiana, and he's a typical Southern lawyer. You know, they say things in very simple terms. I'm a quasi-Southerner myself. I spent most of my adult life in the South, going to Duke University and Emory University School of Law. And Southerners have a way of expressing themselves in common sense terms. And he issued a tweet or a meme this week saying that Stone was actually acting like Beavis and Buckhead. He never seen anybody talk himself into an indictment before. He meant that tongue in cheek, but, you know, humor can have a lot of truth. And that's what Roger has done in many ways. Now, there is selective prosecution in this country. We don't see Hillary Clinton being indicted. We don't see James Comey. We don't see James Baker, the general counsel that worked under Comey. We don't see Andrew McCabe, another FBI high-level official. He was deputy in terms of Comey's reign of terror at the FBI. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, James Clapper of the National Security Agency, who lied that there was no mass surveillance when there was. John Brennan, who did the same thing, head of the CIA. We've seen these people go off scot-free because there is an elite establishment, and it's generally only conservatives and people of faith that wind up getting indicted in Washington, D.C. But the left, they walk off scot-free, and that is not right. And it's something that we're addressing in our citizens' grand juries, because we're going to hold them accountable. Not only are we going to hold Robert Mueller accountable for what he's done, and we've been no pushover, but we're going to hold all these other individuals who walked off scot-free, who Mueller has not gone after. We're going to go after them. We're going to have them indicted by citizens' grand juries. We're going to try them. We're going to convict them. We're going to have them sentenced. We're going to ask President Trump to enforce the sentences. If he doesn't, we'll force them ourselves under citizens' arrests peacefully and legally and properly. But that doesn't justify allegedly lying under oath, and it doesn't justify threatening witnesses. And you're going to hear from Dr. Corsi again. I keep saying this because I want to have him express himself. I'm expressing my view. I am his lawyer, but these are my views, is that doesn't make that right. We impeached Bill Clinton for lying about an intern. And it was taken very seriously by the right at that time, by conservatives. The left poo-pooed it. They said, oh, that's no big deal. But you know what? It is a big deal when you lie under oath. And whatever the state of our legal system, however it is broken down, however it needs to be repaired, however we have a corrupt Justice Department, and we're going to talk about the Bundy case in just a little bit as well, is that does not justify subverting the legal system as it exists when you go under oath and you lie. And Dr. Corsi has told the truth. That's why he's not indicted. That's why Roger Stone was indicted over those allegations. And you have to take it seriously. The other thing I'm going to say is, and you can drink the Kool-Aid that's out there with regard to some in the conservative media, they Sean Hannity's and the others. It doesn't justify using 29 FBI agents to conduct a raid. But if there's a legitimate case and documentation is going to prove that case, even Special Counsel Robert Mueller had the right, without notice, to go in on a warrant and to seize the equipment in Roger Stone's house. Now, you got to keep that in mind. I'm not saying Roger Stone's guilty. What I'm saying is that if there was a legitimate basis for that indictment, and it's not about Russian collusion, it's not about all this other stuff that both sides throw up smoke and mirrors, you're not getting the true facts. The indictment is very simple. It's about lying under oath and threatening witnesses, committing perjury, and, in fact, intimidating witnesses and obstructing justice. That cannot be permitted in a civilized society, and that's what this is all about. So rather than in any way being contrite and accepting responsibility or saying, I'm going to address these charges, I didn't lie, etc., Roger Stone goes off and attacks Jerry Corsi because he simply told the truth, and Roger Stone doesn't like some of the things that he told the truth about. And that's why we're going to be fighting back, and I want you to understand that, with regard to Roger Stone, with regard to his surrogates like Michael Caputo. He has all these little friends out there that work with him that even if he's not speaking, go out and smear other people like Dr. Corsi. Well, I will address that because I don't turn the other cheek, and I do what I think's right. And this is not right. And if Roger thinks he's going to get away with this judge, Amy Berman Jackson, she's highly leftist, and already today she's talked about putting a gag order. There's briefs that are due in a week on that issue, is that Roger, by going after Jerry Corsi, is in effect trying to tamper with a witness. And he did the same thing with Randy Credico. So he would be well advised to lay off of Jerry Corsi. He'd be well advised not to defame me, which he has, and because I'm his lawyer. And there are laws against that too, intimidating the lawyers of witnesses and of parties in civil and criminal litigation. That's illegal. So Roger's digging himself a bigger ditch. I want you to understand that. That does not take away from the fact that it was Jerry Corsi who filed criminal complaints against Robert Mueller. Stone didn't do that. It was Jerry Corsi who filed civil complaints for illegal surveillance, for leaking grand jury information, for collaborating with the Washington Post to smear Corsi. Stone didn't do that. Jerry Corsi is the hero here. He's the one who's taking action rather than just talking. There was a mayor in Washington, D.C. many years ago who made a statement about Jesse Jackson that he don't know how to do anything except wag his mouth. And this was another African American, and it's not enough to wag your mouth or even wag the dog for that matter. I'm not talking about Randy Credico. What was threatened with that dog was a lot worse. And how people feel about their dogs. They're like members of the family. But Larry Klayman does not just talk. And Jerry Corsi does not just talk. We act. And I want you to remember that because that's why we need your support. Jerry has a legal defense fund. You can go to CorsiNation.com for that. With regard to what Freedom Watch is doing and citizens' grand juries to hold the people accountable who did lie, that Mueller will not address, and I named them just a few minutes ago, go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org, and contribute to our cause. We are the mouse that roared. We need to hire more lawyers. We need to hire more staff. We need to ramp up for the citizens' grand jury, for our other hard-hitting cases. See what we're doing with social media companies in terms of holding them accountable for the discrimination against conservatives. What we're doing with our leftist media strike force, with major publications and cable news networks that are subverting the rule of law as well. They're intervening in that. And it is important. And although I don't agree with many of the things that Judge Jackson has done with some of my clients, and we've talked about that in previous shows, is that she's absolutely right. In these cases, you should let the lawyers talk. You should let the legal proceedings proceed. You should not try to influence witnesses, to intimidate witnesses, but you should, in fact, toe the line and try to obey the rule of law. Now, in that regard, my client, the Bundys, have obeyed the rule of law. Their indictment was dismissed over a year ago by even a judge that was hostile to them, recommended by Harry Reid, that evil senator, and President Barack Obama, who recommended her to the bench, who appointed her. She was confirmed. And even she dismissed the indictment due to gross prosecutorial abuse, intimidating witnesses, just what's happened, in this case with regard to Jerry Corsi, and also intimidating whistleblowers from coming forward and suppressing exculpatory evidence. Well, you know what? You know how much I tried to get the government to withdraw this, even the Trump Justice Department. Unfortunately, the president is in control of his own Justice Department. So they have decided to go ahead with this appeal. And if we don't win at the Ninth Circuit, Cliven, his sons, and the other defendants will be retried. They run a risk of being convicted. They didn't do anything wrong, but you never know what can happen in court, and doing life imprisonment. Cliven stood up to the government peacefully and legally. He didn't point a gun at anybody, but the protesters that came peacefully used their Second Amendment rights. And go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Please support that defense fund. It's going to be very costly to defend this appeal. And we also have two other cases involving who owns the land in Nevada, as well as a lawsuit that Ryan Bundy brought pushing back against this prosecutorial misconduct. I'm going to be right back with Jerry Corsi. I want you to hear from the so-called horse's mouth, because Jerry is a patriot. He is brave. And we are moving forward to restore the rule of law.
Dangerous.
You don't hear? Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with my good friend, my client, a real patriot, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Of course, you know what's been happening these days. You know how he's been attacked from every corner. He's holding up. He's fighting against not just the establishment, but he's fighting against statements that are being made by Roger Stone and others. And we just talked about that. But, Jared, I want to find out how you've been holding up under all this pressure. If our viewers and listeners are able to understand just how intense this whole thing has been and how you're dealing with it and how your family's dealing with it.
Well, Larry, it's the most horrible experience I've ever had in my life. The initial phase of this, I think, intensely around Thanksgiving, where the threat was pretty serious. The special prosecutor, Mueller's whole operation, wanted to imprison me. And they were going to do it on saying I lied, but the truth was I did not, which is the crime, knowingly or willfully give them information I knew to be false on a material subject with the intent to deceive them. I didn't do that. I made memory mistakes, and I think now I'm not concerned that they're going to prosecute me, because I think they lost on that. They have passed me by, and the indictment for Roger Stone, person number one, maybe even going to be witness number one, but there's nothing I did wrong that's indicated in that indictment. But to answer your question, Larry, the family is torn up. Is dad going to be in prison? My wife and I. two things have sustained me. My wife of 28 years and my faith in Jesus Christ. Monica said to me early on in this, when we were thinking about the plea deal, because Zelensky and the other prosecutors wanted me to lie, a crime I didn't commit, in order to stay out of prison. And Monica, one day, she woke up and she said, I'd rather visit you the rest of my life and the rest of your life in prison than to be married to someone other than the guy I married. And that was really an important statement, and it really, I can't tell you how, that lifted me and gave me the moral impulse. I mean, if Monica could support me to that extent, we go through anything. And secondly, I've only resolved ever in this to tell the truth. You know that, and that's what I think my obligation is to Jesus Christ and to the law. And my memory has problems. Nobody can answer these questions that you're asked. And remember, 3 years ago, with the precision these prosecutors are capable of drilling down to, where they have everything on you in a 8-inch binder, and they play these games where they're trying to get you to say things that you've forgotten, and they show you documents to prove you're wrong. It's a stupid game. When I went in there to cooperate with them, gave them my computers, proffered everything, my email accounts, my cell phones, I went in to cooperate. So, Larry, to answer your question, has been extremely difficult, but I feel like now we're kind of at a watershed point. It's changing. I think they would be very foolish to try to indict me right now, and I don't think they're going to do it. And I'm resolved to continue telling the truth and continue fighting.
Yeah, and the point I want to make, you do have great support. You've got a great wife who believes in you. And, you've got the facts on your side. And, when you didn't remember anything, Jerry, you went back and you amended it. You didn't hang back. You see, like Roger Stone did, you came forward and you said, okay, now I remember, I went back and I checked. You didn't let it hang out there for a year.
No,
and that's,
did it immediately.
That's a difference here. Yeah, that's the difference between you and Roger Stone. Roger claims he can't remember anything, but he has a pretty good memory when he's disparaging you and me, all over the place. A made-up memory, I might add. But this is something that, is moving forward. And, we're not just dealing with Mueller and the grand jury, and he would not be wise to indict you. We could then challenge his mandate. We could challenge his authority. But more importantly than that, you have always cooperated, and I believe they also know that. And they're starting to appreciate that even more. When Stone attacked you, it actually raises your your standing with the special counsel, you see, and you become an even more important witness because, as I said in the first part of this show, the intimidation with you is very similar to what he did allegedly with Randy Credico. You're a witness, a material witness. And I'll be very surprised, and this is the segue, if Roger Stone doesn't get gagged by Judge Amy Berman Jackson next week when there's a follow-up to the status conference that was held last Friday. We'll be right back with Jerry's response to my question.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
We're back with Dr. Jerome Corsi. When we left off, I asked him what he thought of the possibility of Roger Stone being gagged next week when he's back in front of Judge Amy Berman Jackson. Of course, last Friday there was a status conference which followed an arraignment earlier in the week where I attended. We're going to talk a little bit of that later. But I want to get your thoughts on that, Jerry, in terms of whether you think it's likely that Roger's going to be gagged.
Well, I think it is likely that he'll be gagged. Certainly I want Roger gagged with regards to me. I've taken a lot of abuse here from Roger this week. He's very much attempting to cast me as his villain. He's taken exception with my recollection and what I've written in Silent No More, what I testified to about various events. And I've said to Roger, these aren't even in the indictment. I've never talked to Roger since August 28th, but I mean in the various media interviews I've given. And Larry, quite frankly, I think Roger is trying to influence my testimony. He's trying to intimidate me so I bend my testimony to what he wants it to be. And that, I think, should, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's very dangerous for Roger. And I will draw a line at defamation. Roger is trying to recast me as the villain. Roger ought to realize that the villain is Mueller and these prosecutors. These are the villains. It's not me, Jerome Corsi. I've supported Roger. I've loved Roger. I've worked with Roger. And I've only ever testified to the truth. I've never testified to anything to try to hurt Roger. I've only tried to be as faithful to the truth as I can, and it's tough. 72 years old, my memory isn't perfect. I don't think anybody's memory is perfect. The granularity you're questioned by this grand jury and by the special prosecutors team, I mean, they have an 8-inch thick binder on me. They ask me a question, they go to tab 32, and they pull out something from 2 years ago and says, this contradicts what you just said. So why don't you show me that first? We don't want you reconstructing. We want you remembering. Why? I can't remember. You're doing this to me. You're torturing me. That's what the whole experience in this 40 hours of the Inquisition was about. And I think that's part of the reason, Larry, that we've filed a criminal action complaint with the Attorney General's office on Mueller and a federal U.S. district law case in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to press these cases, and I want Roger to stop talking about me because I think it's very damaging not only to me but to him. He doesn't maybe realize it, but I believe it is.
The senator from Louisiana, Southern senator, Southern reasoning, common sense, John Kennedy said Roger, in effect, talked himself into an indictment in many ways and issued a mem, Beavis and Butthead, whatever the name is. I never watched the show.
I mean, they might not muzzle Roger in general because the special prosecutor has figured out that Roger will also talk himself into a conviction, and he'll talk himself right into jail. Roger does not understand that the indictment against him is very narrowly drawn. It's not on collusion. It's drawn on predominantly lying to Congress and then witness tampering and obstruction of justice, but the core issues are lying to Congress, and the special prosecutor has tons of documentation where they can take a statement that Roger made to Congress and they can show irrefutable documentary evidence that will make Roger's statement materially false. And that's what this case is going to turn on. It's not going to turn on theatrics. It's not a public relations exercise. Roger doesn't understand that at law, they're very narrow questions, and they're going to be very hard for Roger if he continues talking. Probably already talked too much because the documentary evidence is there and the special prosecutor has it.
And of course, Jerry, I was in court Monday. I was observing on your behalf and just generally at the arraignment hearing. And at that hearing, Roger's two lawyers, Florida lawyers who don't practice in Washington, D.C., don't know the lay of the land, they had to bring somebody in, got up and said, well, we agree that we're going to waive speedy trial, Roger's speedy trial. And that was a huge mistake, in my opinion. See, speedy trial would require a trial within 60 days. It's in the Constitution. It's in the Sixth Amendment. And what they're saying now is that they want to have this thing tried. This is what they said today in court during the October timeframe. Judge Amy Berman Jackson said, no, I want it in August. I'll decide which one I want. But even that's too long because when those FBI agents went in a week ago Friday, they seized everything in Roger's house, all of his computers, his electronics, everything else. So it's not only what the special counsel has obtained through third parties, whether it's the National Security Agency, the FBI, the NSA, or whatever, and they have everything. They have absolute everything. We know that. I brought 2 cases against the NSA and the CIA. They trap every email, every text message, everything. But now they've got it from the horse's mouth, right inside his house. So consequently, to agree to speedy trial, to give them more time to look at everything. And they've got his financial records. He may be indicted for something else, or maybe there's a supersedious indictment here. This was a huge tactical error, in my opinion, by his lawyers. I want to get your thoughts here as well. Where do you think this whole thing's headed? You know, not just in terms of Roger Stone and not just in terms of you, but in terms of the President of the United States. Because, you know, just this week we had to respond to a subpoena issued by the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is run by two chairmen who are the flip side of the same coin. One is Richard Burr, a Republican. He's the chairman from North Carolina. North Carolina is becoming very Democrat, okay? And then, of course, on the other side of the coin, you have the minority ranking member, Mark Warner, who's extremely partisan, does press conferences, trashes Trump, you know, anything he can say. He's the Senate version of Adam Schiff in the House of Representatives. So anyway, we're dealing with that because they want all the documents that we gave to the special counsel, and they want your testimony, and I just sent in a letter today in that regard. And we're trying to cooperate there as well. And we'll tell the truth if in the proper circumstance that you get immunity, that you can come forward, because we don't want to be tripped up by these very politicized chairmen of the committees, and you will produce any relevant documents in any event. So I just want to get your overall thoughts on where everything's headed, particularly with regard to the president, because in my view, this committee is out to get the president, both the Republican chairman and the Democrat chairman.
Well, I think the whole process, special prosecutor and these committees are all out to get Donald Trump impeached or so crippled that he won't win a second term. My nightmare is going to continue, Larry, because as we know, we'll have each of these committees, and the Democrats will have. We've already got the Senate Intelligence Committee with a subpoena. That's going to be followed by a couple of House committees, at least one or two, and we're going to go through much of this coming year with more legal expenses, more testimony, and you know it's a nightmare because anything you say in one is going to be compared to everything else you've said in all the others. In terms of where President Trump is at, I think one of the reasons that back in Thanksgiving that Mueller's prosecutors were so viciously angry at me was because I could not connect Roger Stone to Assange. It was absolutely clear after 40 hours of testimony in which they, I think, abused me and psychologically tormented me with the questioning. I couldn't find anyone who connected me to Assange or was involved with Assange, and that was what I said from the very beginning, that in July and August 2016 I did figure out on my own that Assange had possessed his emails. I'm being persecuted because I was smart enough or intuitive enough to have come to that deduction correctly, and I don't think there is anything on President Trump. I told the Mueller prosecutors that I asked them, you need to go and talk to Assange. Why isn't anybody starting with giving Assange immunity? Assange has said repeatedly that the Russians did not steal the emails from the Democrats that he had. And if that's the case, this entire Mueller investigation and all these Senate and House investigations are predicated on a false premise. If Russia did not steal the DNC emails, there is no case here at all.
Jerry, this whole issue with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and, whether you talked to them and whether Roger coordinated the release, there was a woman who came forward on Newsmax this week by the name of Cassandra Fairbanks. She was obviously sent by Roger. It was a setup. I was on there. You can see it at LarryKlayman.com, probably CorsiNation.com. And she attacked you, and on behalf of Roger called you a liar and said she had been with Julian Assange recently, as early January of this year and last year, and bragged about what a great man he is and everything else. Tell us about Cassandra Fairbanks. She defamed you too, and we're going to have to deal with that because she was sent by Roger. This was a hit. And let the people understand what you know about her.
Well, I was at a meeting. I don't remember the exact dates of the meeting in Washington. This woman came up and confronted me. I mean, I thought she was crazy. And she said, I was wrong that Assange had left the embassy. I thought maybe when Assange got his Ecuadorian passport, he might have left. And she said she knew that because she'd been with Assange I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I was with Assange in the embassy, and I had sexual relations with him. And I said, what? I was saying, I don't need that. Well, who are you? And she went on and on about this. And I said, look, I'm really not interested. And so then she repeats that she was, and when this, I guess it led to the conversation you had with her on Newsmax. I couldn't believe that John Cardillo was actually going to broadcast her, but she did affirm that I didn't have any contact with Assange. She was clear about that. She affirmed my testimony. Actually, she, was exculpatory of mine and providing additional evidence that I'd never had anything to do with Assange. But all the things she said about me as being old and deranged and lying and laughing at me, and she's the one who went over there and slept with Assange. And then she's also close to Roger. I mean, I thought you were right, Larry. We had an obligation to turn that over to the special prosecutor because it was material to their investigation. We couldn't be in possession of this and not turn it over. And, they're looking for the link between Assange and Stone, and this woman is talking about pillow talk stuff.
I think she probably bought herself a visit from some FBI agents and possibly subpoenaed to testify in front of the grand jury, because now she held herself out in doing Roger's bidding and attacking you. She made herself a material witness. She has spoken with Assange, and you got to believe she's talking to him about stuff that Mueller's interested in. So, that's why I say you talk too much. You want to be cute. You want to attack Jerry Corsi. You want to track Larry Klayman. You want to use surrogates to do it. And you dig yourself a deeper ditch. Tell us, Jerry, we only have about a minute and a half, how people can help you, because, your legal costs are huge. And not just with regard to the grand jury investigation, but protecting yourself generally with regard to what's going on with Roger Stone and fighting back. And also, we've got the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation and a likely House Intelligence Committee investigation on the horizon. How can they help you financially? Because we really need the help to defray the legal costs and expenses.
And Mueller has now cut off all my income because they even pursued that whether my severance pay at InfoWars was hush money. So I have no income now. And my legal defense fund is on CorsiNation.com. And you can contribute. You can see various ways. You can contribute with PayPal, donor box, and a GoFundMe, or write a check. There's a post office box there. And also my book, Silent No More, which will be in a hardcover edition in March, but it's available right now as an ebook, and on Amazon as an audiobook, and on iTunes as an iTunes audiobook. So that book is also going to be very important for people to read and will generate some revenue for me. But Larry, I'm desperate right now to get some money in to pay these legal bills, because I'm resolved in my moral responsibility to make sure all the lawyers are fully paid, including you, Larry. And
Jerry, we're going to come back in the next segment. We're going to come back in the next segment, the beginning of it, and talk about this and take at least a minute there to stress this. We'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to follow up on what Jerry Corsi was saying. He does need the financial support. I want people to support him and support the cases we have at Freedom Watch. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. Our citizens' grand juries, we are moving forward with that. We're going to talk about that in other shows. But as I said, we're going to be indicting and convicting and trying the Clintons, Comey, Clapper, James Baker, McCabe, Strzok, Page, the whole lot of these criminals that have been left out, while other people are being persecuted, mostly conservatives and people of faith. But it's very important to understand the facts here. And that's why I took so much time laying them out, because the Kool-Aid that you see on Sean Hannity or you see in other places from the right, the Kool-Aid that you see from the left on MSNBC and on CNN, that's what it is. Okay, it's all positioning. It's all based on ratings. It's based on advertising dollars. It's not getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's actually happening. And I want people to remember that Jerry Corsi and I are the ones that have actually taken on Special Counsel Robert Mueller frontally. My client has told the truth, but we've not rolled over. And it's not Roger Stone who has taken them on. He'd rather defame a witness that he thinks he's going to intimidate at trial. And Jerry Corsi has always said he never wanted to harm Roger Stone. That same is true of me, whatever my opinion may be of him. We did not, and particularly because it affects my client. And what you have to do in these proceedings, and it doesn't matter who you are, left, right, or center, when you're under oath, you tell the truth. Even when you're not under oath, you tell the truth. You don't threaten witnesses. You don't try to intimidate them. You don't obstruct justice. And when you do that, you're biting off more than you could chew. And Roger's basic problem is he thinks he's smarter than everybody else. Thinks he can outsmart them. He thinks he can outtalk them. But he's learned that that's not the case. And the more he talks, the more he defames Dr. Corsi or me or anybody else that is telling the truth, the bigger ditch he is creating. And ironically, he's putting Dr. Corsi in a very positive light with regard to the special counsel, because now they can appreciate the difference between the two men. But I want you to support what I'm also doing at Freedom Watch. We are your Justice Department. We have no Justice Department, whether it's the Bundys, whether it's Schaefer Cox, whether it's Sheriff Joe Arpaio. They don't stand up for him. He's trying to get his conviction removed at the Ninth Circuit. They bailed out of that one. We have no Justice Department. The people that run this Justice Department, even during the Trump administration, they have no guts. They're part of the establishment. They protect themselves. And underneath them are 97% loyalists to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. People have contributed money. People have voted for her. And that is why you need to support Freedom Watch, because we call it as we see it. We are conservative. We're proud of that. We're nonpartisan. But we do, and Larry Klayman has always done what he thinks is right. And no pun intended. We do it from a right perspective, conservative perspective. But that's something I need to keep emphasizing. And that's what separates us from other public interest groups, such as my former group. They get documents. Okay, great documents. You have cards, you play with cards. But when you really want to, score, you have to put the cards on the table and you have to lay money on the table, figuratively speaking. And that's what we do. We risk everything for what we believe is right and to try to save this country and to restore the vision of our founding fathers. We would like to think of ourselves like John Adams, who risked his entire law practice to defend the British troops on Boston Common because he thought that was right. And he won. And he later became a founding father, one of the greatest founding fathers. Him and Jefferson are my two favorites. I'd like Jefferson a little more because he didn't believe in such government control. But Adams was a very fine individual as well. And that's what we need to do. We need to think of ourselves in terms of what the founding fathers would have done in today's world. And we need to restore freedom and liberty. And we need to get the government off our backs. And we need to also defend ourselves from those in society that would harm us and harm our families. And that's why our Second Amendment rights are so important as well. And that's what the Bundys had done. And that's what other people have done that I represent. So please go to freedomwatchusa.org. Can't say it enough. Contribute to our cause with tax-deductible contributions. We need your help. We are your private Justice Department. I'm going to be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman and Special Defense Counsel Larry Klayman. And until then, God bless you. God bless the nation. And God save the nation.